Cambrian. During the Cambrian period, most creatures were small and slow, crawling along the seafloor, but in the waters near what is now China, a group of strange, worm-like animals was starting to grow bigger and bigger. One in particular would become something the ocean had never seen before, omnidens, a name that literally means all teeth. When scientists found its mouth, a strange circular opening ringed with rows of sharp teeth, it became clear that omnidens wasn't as small as the others. It could grow up to 6.5 feet long, roughly the length of a human. Around its mouth were claw-like spines that could trap struggling prey and drag them into that toothed circle to be shredded apart. This absolute monster ruled the seas for millions of years until catastrophic drops in ocean oxygen disrupted food webs across the globe. For a massive predator that required huge amounts of food and oxygen just to stay alive, this ultimately led to its extinction. Ordovician. The seas were warmer and much more crowded now, full of creatures like trilobites and early corals. The real power in these oceans, though, belonged to a new kind of animal, the nautiloids. They were early relatives of squids and octopuses, and one in particular became the most important creature at the time, Endoceras. Encased in a long, straight, cone-shaped shell, it could stretch nearly 20 feet long, roughly the length of a full-size pickup truck. Inside that shell was a soft body armed with powerful tentacles that likely secreted a sticky adhesive to grip its victims. Once caught, a sharp beak crushed straight through the armor of animals below, passing the meal to an inner, tooth-lined tongue to slice it apart. Instead of chasing prey across the seafloor, Endoceras likely hovered above the bottom, using its massive shell for balance, and striking down when animals wandered too close. Eventually, though, the planet basically turned against it. Temperatures dropped, and massive ice sheets spread across the southern pole, locking up water, draining shallow seas, and plunging ocean temperatures. This proved disastrous for Endoceras and its prey, bringing its reign to an end. In the period that followed, something faster, better armored, and far more aggressive rose to the top: Silurian. The Silurian seas were shallower and often mixed with rivers, lagoons, and salty estuaries where the water was murky and food was easy to find. It's here that a new group of hunters began to thrive: Eurypterids, better known as sea scorpions. They were distant cousins of today's scorpions, and while many were only a few inches long, one family within the group grew into one of the largest arthropods that ever lived, Pterygonidae. Members of this group could stretch past 6 feet in length. At the front of their bodies were massive, tooth-lined claws. They used them to grab their prey and puncture and crush them. They needed their large, forward-facing eyes for sharp depth perception, letting them judge distance and strike with precision. However, the fish sharing those murky waters were evolving with time. Some of them were slowly growing thicker plates of bone across their heads and stronger jaws to defend themselves. This continued for millions of years until one line of armored fish basically became a war machine. It grew into something so heavily plated and powerful that even a 6-foot sea scorpion could no longer stop it. And it was precisely this line of armored fish that became the apex predator of the next period: Devonian. By now, the oceans were richer than ever, filled with early sharks, coiled ammonites, and fish of every shape. But one group stood out: the placoderms, fish covered in thick, bony armor plates instead of scales. The most terrifying species of that group was Dunkleosteus. Modern estimates place it at about 13 feet long, roughly the size of a small car. Its most terrifying part, however, is its mouth. Instead of teeth, it had sharp, bony jaw plates that stayed permanently razor-sharp as they wore down, working like built-in blades. Its bite was one of the strongest of any fish in history, strong enough to snap through heavy shells and bite clean through the armor of other placoderms. Its unique joint system allowed it to drop its lower jaw in just 20 milliseconds, creating a vacuum that sucked prey directly into its mouth before those plates snapped shut. It was, quite literally, a living guillotine. Over time, however, sea levels dropped and oxygen levels collapsed. When a mass extinction struck at the end of the Devonian, it hit the placoderms hardest of all. This left a massive void in the ocean, opening the door for a new predator with one of the most disturbing eating methods in history: Carboniferous. By the Carboniferous, vast forests and swampy coastlines were pumping huge amounts of oxygen into the air and sea. Sharks took full advantage of this, exploding in diversity, so much so that this period is often called the Golden Age of Sharks. One of the weirdest and most dangerous among the shark-like creatures was Deadliest. It could grow up to 20 feet long, close to the size of a modern great white shark, and possess something no animal alive today has: a single straight row of teeth in each jaw. It likely used a sort of two-gear system, pulling its bottom jaw upward to create create both a slicing and dragging effect that pulled prey deeper into its mouth while slicing it up. Rather than chewing normally, Edestis likely thrashed its head up and down, using those long blades to slash into its prey. These teeth never fell out and never stopped growing. Instead of shedding them, older teeth were pushed further out of the mouth, protruding forward like an open pair of scissors. While Edestis itself disappeared just before the end of the Carboniferous, its unique weapon would be taken to an even more disturbing extreme by the next predator: Permian. The Permian features, in my opinion, one of the most disturbing creatures that ever roamed the Earth. At this time, the oceans were building toward the biggest apocalypse in history, packed with reefs, thick-shelled mollusks, and every kind of shark relative imaginable. Most importantly, there was one specific shark-like animal that took the concept of Edestis's teeth to a horrifying extreme. Its name was Helicoprion. Instead of a straight line, it coiled its teeth into a tight spiral whirl inside its jaw, just like a living buzzsaw. When biting down, it pressed those sharp, serrated teeth against a cartilaginous pad in its upper jaw, causing catastrophic lacerations to its prey. Its blades were angled like cutting hooks, suggesting it targeted fast, agile targets by slashing deep, fatal wounds. Some estimates put Helicoprion at an astonishing 40 feet long, making it one of the largest predators of its time. It ruled the seas for millions of years before going extinct. Sometime later, the Great Dying struck, wiping out roughly 96% of all marine species, the closest time life on Earth has ever come to being completely erased. In the empty waters that remained, the new apex predator that rose up the food chain wasn't a fish or a shark, but something totally different: Triassic. The Triassic saw the rise of a new type of animal as its top predator, a group of air-breathing reptiles heading back into the sea. They had adapted to life underwater, evolving dolphin-like bodies while still breathing air at the surface, just like whales do today. Early on, they were a pretty normal size, but as the period wore on, one branch of the family became the absolute ruler of the seas, Ichthyotitan. Based on massive jawbone fossils, scientists estimate it could have stretched to around 82 feet long, roughly the size of a blue whale, making it possibly the largest animal to ever swim in the sea, reptile or not. Fossil evidence even suggests the specific individual we know it from was still growing when it died, meaning full-grown adults may have been even larger. Unlike the armored or blade-toothed hunters before it, its main weapon was simply its size. Its huge body moved fast and covered vast distances while hunting squid and fish in the open ocean. It was so massive that it could simply swallow some of its prey whole. Overall, size proved to be a pretty effective strategy for the Triassic, but in the next period, sheer power arguably became even more important: Jurassic. You might think of the Jurassic as the dinosaur era, and you'd be right, but the top predator in the seas at the time wasn't technically a dinosaur. You might know Plesiosaurus, the famous long-necked creature. You might not know, however, its cousin, Pliosaurus. It could reach up to 43 feet long, with a skull alone stretching around 6 feet. Inside that skull sat more than 100 large, interlocking teeth, some estimated at over 11 inches long. But here's the crazy thing: its bite has been calculated at around 33,000 newtons. To put that in perspective, imagine taking the entire weight of a massive SUV and balancing all of that weight onto the tip of a single tooth. That is the force it delivered in a single bite. For comparison, humans have a bite force of about 700 newtons. Rather than just picking off small fish, it likely regularly attacked other large marine reptiles, including the predators we talked about in the Triassic, the ichthyosaurs, using that crushing bite to cripple prey almost its own size in a single strike. It even had a highly specialized sensory organ in their snout that could detect small changes in water pressure. This allowed them to hunt in murky, dark, or deep waters. There was a problem, though. The mid-Cretaceous period brought a violent surge of volcanic activity. Massive eruptions underwater pumped out an insane amount of CO2, triggering intense global warming. This made the oceans hotter, acidic, and in many places completely devoid of oxygen. As you can imagine, that was unfortunately the end for the great Pliosaurus. Cretaceous. The Cretaceous, with its warm waters, saw a family of former land-dwelling lizards push further and further from shore. They kept adapting until one lineage stopped resembling anything that had ever walked on land. The result was Mosasaurus. Full-grown adults could stretch past 50 feet with a long, muscular body. What made it especially dangerous was not just the rows of curved teeth lining its jaws, but a second set hidden further back on the roof of its mouth, angled backward to drag anything caught between them straight down its throat with no chance of slipping free. Highly territorial and fearless, it fought other giant apex predators, including its own kind. Also, interestingly, Mosasaurus was a global presence. Its fossils have been found on virtually every continent on Earth, including Antarctica. Then, without warning, its main threat came from the sky. An asteroid struck the planet, and the shockwaves tore through global food chains within months, starving out the Mosasaurus until it went extinct. Paleogene. After hundreds of millions of years of domination, the asteroid impact ended the age of giant marine reptiles incredibly quickly, and for a stretch of time afterward, no single group stepped in to dominate right away. That gap didn't last. On land, a group of hoofed mammals began wading into rivers and coastal shallows, and over a few million years, it turned into Basilosaurus, a giant early whale that grew close to 60 feet. Its body was incredibly weird for being a whale. It was long, narrow, and almost snake-like. It even had tiny legs with functioning knee and ankle joints as an evolutionary leftover from when it was a land-dwelling animal. At the front of its jaw were sharp, cone-shaped teeth built for grabbing, while teeth further back had jagged, multi-pointed edges suited to slicing flesh apart once prey was caught. Matter of fact, it had the most complex teeth of any animal on the list, with canines, incisors, and serrated molars. This allowed it to chew and chop tough large prey into smaller pieces before swallowing, a trait modern whales don't have. Fossil stomach contents show it targeted the young of smaller whale species, and it seems to have hunted alone rather than in groups. At some point, however, especially due to the opening of Drake Passage, temperatures began dropping. Ice started building up over Antarctica for the first time, and sea levels fell. These changes disrupted the warm, shallow seas Basilosaurus depended on, and within a few million years, that entire early branch of whales died out, making way for modern whales. However, this made space for an entirely different lineage of predator too, one that was about to produce its most massive member yet. Neogene. During the Neogene, we finally reached the predator with the strongest recorded bite in history, Megalodon. Remember the strong bite of the Pliosaurus? That one was around 33,000 newtons. Megalodon has a 182,000 newton bite force. Its bite was strong enough to break straight through a whale's bones rather than just its skin. It changed its tactics based on the prey, sometimes biting off the flippers or tails of whales first to immobilize them, or directly targeting the heads of smaller predators. Its teeth alone are disturbing. It has 276 palm-sized serrated teeth, set inside a mouth wide enough to take in two grown adults side by side. Also, Megalodon likely stretched somewhere between 50 and 60 feet, making it the biggest shark in history. These traits are the reason this shark faced no real rival, feeding on whatever swam near it. What eventually broke that dominance was a slow squeeze from several directions at once. Global temperatures kept falling. While many prey whales adapted by moving into colder, deeper water it wasn't built for. Around the same time, a leaner, faster shark, the newly evolving great white shark, and early predatory sperm whales, such as Leviathan, began pulling from that same shrinking food supply. Losing its habitat and now its food source altogether, Megalodon went extinct. Quaternary. The Quaternary is the period we're in right now, and its apex predator is vastly different from the ones that came before. It's a highly social, warm-blooded hunter that has been refining its methods for millions of years. That animal is the orca, sometimes called the killer whale, even though it's actually the largest member of the dolphin family. Adults can grow past 30 feet long with rows of large interlocking teeth built for gripping rather than slicing. Here's the peculiar part though. Much of an orca's hunting depends on teamwork and intelligence, rather than brute force alone. Orcas travel in tight family groups, and within those groups, techniques get taught and passed down across generations. For example, some pods work together to create waves that wash seals off ice floes, while others have learned to isolate and exhaust prey many times their own size, including great white sharks and even blue whales. They're so intelligent that they have their own distinct cultures, with different hunting tactics, diets, and even distinct sort of languages. These populations are so isolated and vastly different from one another that they don't even interbreed. Their sharp echolocation also lets them track prey through dark or murky water with precision. Because of all these traits, they have essentially no natural predators of their own as adults. They are the kings of the seas. If you want to discuss this video or suggest an idea for the next one, join my Discord, link in the description.